Good morning, Life Class. Welcome to another Sunday. And I apologize last week that I omitted our ritual. I've been talking about the power of ritual. And so I'll double down this morning by re-emphasizing that we will be trying to start with a coming to the presence with our breath, and then approach with a brief prayer devotional, and then get into our topic. So as we settle into our chair this morning, and we are coming to you listeners from Nashville, Woodmont Christian Church in the heart of Green Hills on this very cold and snowy, stormy day. And we are eating our chocolate decaf mocha delicious mousses with spoons that our Julie has brought to every class member with leftovers. We just wish you'd make a trip to Nashville and visit our classroom, and you could see what it's like. We have a roaring fire here in the fireplace. Could not be better. So we welcome you. We welcome you. Use your imagination and creative sense of play to join us this morning. Wherever you're sitting, we invite you to take a breath, be present, feel your back, your entire body, your seat, your trunk, in your chair, your feet on the floor, making contact with that ground. And let's take a deep inhale together, pursing our lips and letting out our breath. Very, very, very slowly. Relax your shoulders. Let them drop. Another one. Inhale through your nose. Purse your lips and let your breath out very, very, very slowly. Begin to feel this through your body, letting your arms hang to your sides. Begin to let go of where you are tense. Let's take another breath in through your nose. Fill up those lungs, hold it a minute, and let it go very, very, very slowly through your mouth. I don't know about you, but I feel a bit more silent inside myself. Just a moment of silence. As a cleansing of the mind and heart begins to prepare you for a conversation today that would lighten you and enrich your life. As we approach with prayer and devotion, I'd like to offer you a prayer that's written by Peter Gregg of the United Kingdom, who is so wonderful in his broadcast called Lectio Divino. Father, I thank you that millions of people will be learning today about this topic. Please speak powerfully to convict, to comfort, and conform our minds to yours. We pray today for all the children, all the adults learning about you. Thank you that you always love to put them first, and help us all to be more trusting, humble, and playful, just like children. Holy Spirit, revive us today, inspire the politicians, the educators, the artists, the journalists, the economists, and the scientists in our world today with ideas that can change our world for good. We ask blessings on all families represented here for wellness and direction and guidance. Amen. Well, I wanted to say that personally, this topic I'm getting ready to announce, one of the first memories that I had when I looked to see that this was up for today, I had a memory of it being about 12 years ago. And I was in Oklahoma City with my husband's daughter, Kari, and she had begun to have her children. So this was not my biological grandchildren, but I was getting ready for a launch of grandchildren to come my way. We now have 10, as you all know, between my grandchildren and his grandchildren. All of them have come since we have been married and together. This was 12 years ago, and I had offered to keep little Melanie, who was then 8 or 9 months old, so that Roy's daughter and Roy, my husband, could spend a whole day out shopping, which was really going to be a delight. They love to do that together. So here was Granny Annie going into training, and I had little Melanie, who was just the most adorable, adorable child. And so after about 45 minutes, and they'd been gone, it was only like 8:30 in the morning because they were going to go hit the Walmart sales. I got this sense of unease and jitteriness within me. And I thought, what is that about? Everything's going great. Looked at my watch, and only 5 minutes later, only 5 minutes later. And I had this just addictive urge to get to my planner, to get to my phone, to see what was going on. And I realized that I couldn't do the simplest thing in the world, which was just to play. It was the most humbling feeling. Well, that said, Anne, you got a lot more work to do with yourself than you thought you did. And so this opened up a whole new layer for me in going back to the roots of how did I learn to play as a child? Did I learn to play as a child? Obviously, probably not enough. And so I bring this topic to you all in our series of learning to reparent ourselves, learning to play and have fun. I think that the times that we are in right now, there's probably not a more pertinent topic. And I actually heard a term the other day that I thought was so good. It is necessary for us to build up a meaningful endurance. It is necessary for us to build up a meaningful endurance, and that is to thrive during these times. So I believe that play, having researched play, worked on my own life in play, particularly intensely over the last 12 years, is what gives us the resilience and the buoyance to last this hard life. This life is difficult. We must have play. So in our Lift series, I want to share with you some of the research findings from Tim Fletcher and some also from my own research. So when it comes to reparenting, what we mean by that is we meet the needs that we have today that weren't met when we were children, so that we can become more healthy. In that moment with adorable little Melanie, when all of a sudden my insides broke open and I became so anxious, I was not nearly as healthy as I boasted that I thought I was. Sure, I can handle a whole day, go have fun. I went haywire inside after about 30 minutes, right? So that is a big part of the recovery journey from complex trauma. And we want to look at the need that we as human beings have for play and have for fun. One of the things that Tim Fletcher pointed out in some of his trainings on this that was interesting, because I had read this book too, was that there's actually an institute, the National Institute for Play, and the major researcher is Dr. Stuart Brown. And there is a fabulous book, if you have any interest in looking at this further. It's called Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. And it is, he defines play as a biological drive as integral to our health as sleep or nutrition. Can you imagine? Play, sleep, nutrition. We are designed by nature to flourish through play. That's a quote from Dr. Brown. Now, what is so interesting about him, and I think that this is probably what's on the book leaf or something, is how he has spent his career. There's 6,000 sort of play history, or with each person, each case he studied, and the range is remarkable. It goes from prisoners or people who've been given life imprisonment for committing homicides up through Nobel Peace Prize winners. Can you imagine? Every sort of person in the world, and studies them over decades about the role of play in their life. So, nothing, and what he found was nothing lights up their brain so much as play in positive ways. That is it. And I'll give you some reasons why. It's not just when we're children. We need it more than ever as adults, because play stimulates parts of our brains in very positive ways that other things do not touch. And it's such an important thing. Now, if we are recovering from our subject, our complex trauma, it's affected this whole play area of our life in negative ways. And in this class, we want to begin to learn to understand that, and we want to begin to suggest tools that you can practice so that we can learn to play. And that's what my own personal journey had been about. So Dr. Brown says this: play is an absorbing, apparently purposeless activity that provides enjoyment. See, that was where I got hung up. You never did anything without a purpose in our household. See, it didn't fit with my beliefs. So learning this was very difficult for me. And also, Dr. Brown says it includes a suspension of self-consciousness and time. So if any of you have ever been to my retreats where I talk about flow, being in the flow state, autotelic is another word, talks about being in the flow. That is when you're not conscious of time. That's what you want to go for, and play is a great way to do that. In other words, play is a healthy escape from the stresses and responsibilities of life. So it just takes you out of yourself, out of our stresses for a little while, out of the pressures. And it allows us to be what's called rejuvenated. So it's a very helpful self-care type of thing. Basically a fun activity. It's an activity, it's a new adventure. So that's kind of what we're going to include in our understanding of play. But it's also more than an activity, more than an adventure. It is also an attitude. Now, we mentioned Mary Poppins a couple of weeks ago. We drew a lot from that activity. So we're going to do that again. So you've got the Banks children. When you start off watching Mary Poppins, they have these very, very messy rooms. And their responsibility, of course, is to clean their room. And they are just dreading it. It is drudgery. It's awful. And, that's what you get to do when you get punished. You got to clean your room. So what does Mary Poppins do? She turns it into a game. She makes it fun. And she turns it into play. So what she basically says, when you approach life with the right attitude, it takes that drudgery away. It takes away some of the stress. It makes it more enjoyable, which makes all of life more enjoyable. So it's also about your attitude or your approach to fun. Very often over the years, I have maintained this. I'm going, okay, I really hate doing X. What would it be like if this were actually fun? What if I stopped every 10 minutes and 5 minutes of fun? and that were my carrot, that were my reward. And I set up things like an obstacle course that I hate to do in my house just for that. And I don't know if I learned it from Mary Poppins or what, but it works, you know. So play is so important. In the time when a child goes from infancy, babyhood, to about 10 years old, play should be a very, very big part of their life. You eat, you sleep, you play, even though there's a lot of school years in there. So play is a real priority. And that's about all that a child is capable of during a lot of those years. So that tells us right away, okay, wow, play must be really important because that's what children are made to do. What is accomplished in a child through play? Well, there's a lot of benefits that come to a child through play. Number one, learning life skills, learning muscle coordination. If you look at baby animals as well, and I know some of us just love to watch videos because they're just so cute. That's a relaxing form of self-care for many people. They spend their early years playing the baby animals and the pouncing and the wrestling and the learning how to hunt, like on National Geographic videos. And that's where they learn their muscle coordination and their skills. So their little animal brains are developing and putting together all those little circuits that control muscles and coordination. And it's so important for developing skills in the brain, but they're also developing their social skills in their little packs, in their little circles of belongings in the animal world. And they're learning to get along with others. They're learning to share. They're learning to cooperate, learning respect, learning how to solve the conflicts as they come up, learning to play. So it's really helpful in learning social bonds and skills. And it also teaches them about winning and losing. It teaches them that if you win in a game, it teaches them if you lose in a game, it doesn't make you a loser. And if you learn to lose gracefully, you learn to win gracefully, you learn to still respect the other person, even though you've won or even though you've lost. All of those are important skills. And, they need their parents. They need parents to help them emphasize the importance of those things. So for children, play is a wonderful thing to develop the child's imagination. They can be curious, they can create, things are not so stereotyped in gender lines, but let's just say tea parties and princesses and cowboys and Indians and experiencing all of those, dressing up and conquering the world and King of the Mountain and, being book characters and all of those kind of things develops the brain, develops the imagination, and develops self-confidence because the child gets good at things and to themselves they go, hey, wow, I'm really good at doing this. And on top of that, I really like doing this. This is something I like. And they develop self-confidence. So it's through play they begin to make friends. They strengthen the bond, make good friendships, and above all, understand the importance of rules. So they begin to realize, finally, that if you're playing a game, it can't just be that everybody just does whatever that they want to do, because it's not about punishment. That's not why a rule exists. There just needs to be so that everything can happen well. They're not separated. Everybody doesn't go home crying. Nobody gets a bloody nose. They just have to do it so that things work. So play plays a big role in the development of the child's brain. There's just these millions and millions of circuits that are being formed. But while that's going on, here we go back to our earlier studies about the release of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, particularly in physical play. They get fun, that get pleasure. All those feel-good bonding, connection, friendship, love chemicals that come out with play. Here's a really interesting point, and there's a lot of research around this. The need for what we call unstructured play is really being shown that the unstructured play can be even more important in developing creativity than what's called structured play. Structured play is play where parents set the rules. They set the boundaries for what you do, who does what, and kind of oversee the play. Unstructured play is where the kids just together play a game, explore, be creative, imagine. And so the unstructured play has much greater effects on the brain in a positive way than controlled structured play. Because in unstructured play, they're learning problem solving. It develops the prefrontal cortex. They're figuring stuff out. They're communicating with each other. All of those things are so important for the brain's development in learning about the environment, learning their own limitations on their own in ways they never would in structured play. Here's the thing. We often think that play is for children, but that once you get to be an adult, then it's responsibility and it's work, work, work. But what we're finding in neuroscience is that the adult brain needs play just as much as that child brain needs play. So the danger that all of us have is that as we go from life as a child where we play all the time, that as we get older, there's less play. There's more responsibility, even less play and more responsibility. So the adult life to many, and especially in our economy right now as things are so tight and so dismal, many adults that I talk to and hear about, there's no time to play. They're barely making ends meet, with 2 jobs. And then it's just Groundhog Day. They just start it all over again. And so we can easily put all our value in stress, work, responsibility, and just think, okay, play is totally unnecessary. We don't have time for play. And it just drops out of our lives. What they're finding out is just as in a child play, in an adult brain, it also releases dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. All those feel-good chemicals strengthen our adult bonds. They make us feel better. They fill up our emotional gas tanks. They heal our limbic brain. They provide a good limbic brain environment. All of those things result in less stress. They result in less irritability, less anxiety, less depression. Actually, play is something that helps build our emotional health. So play becomes an important part of healthy self-care. And that's what I want you to realize, that it provides the necessary break or stepping away from that stress of life, the pressure of life. It takes us out of it for just a little while so we can refill our gas tanks. Kind of like I was saying, building a meaningful endurance so that we can cope with the stresses of life. So if you remember the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, where the parasympathetic is the calming, the grounding, it activates that part of the nervous system so that we can rest and calm and heal. And especially in intimate relationships, in marriages, in committed relationships, these, and having just passed Valentine's Day, play refreshes a long-term adult-to-adult relationship. It strengthens connection. I was laughing at this particular quote because it's about thinking it this way, that many people, when they start in intimate relationships, go through a dating process. And I wrote, or it used to be that way, but not so much nearly in our society today in the quick hookup or moving in together. Often that dating process is totally short-circuited. And, people often ask me, how do I bring that back? And I refer them to a book by Judith Seals called Define Courtship, and they're learning to date, which sounds really funny, but our digital age has really taught young people or even older people to kind of skip that step. But if you can do that, it's all about fun. It's all about having fun and play. Let's go to a movie. Let's go for a walk. Let's go to the circus. Let's go to a fair of some kind. See the other under all different kinds of environments. Let's play games, not mind games. So what happens today is too often people don't even meet. They're subject to only mind games. So that fun, that real healthy fun in lots of environments over a longer period of time should be a foundation of the relationship. And when people begin to enjoy each other, it creates a bond that is strengthened over time as they learn how to have fun together, and they learn what is the truth about each other in that. So what can happen as a relationship begins to get committed, and especially for people that are younger and begin to have kids, they get on with their life and they go, okay, now we got to handle all these stresses and pressures. We've got a home, we've got a house, we've got a mortgage, we have jobs. Oh my gosh, we've got 2 kids now. Well, what's the first thing to go? Well, play is, we don't have time for play. Let's drop play from our relationship because it's really not a priority because, we're grown-ups now. And, what can we do? What can we do with that time now? Because we don't have to play anymore. And so without realizing it, an essential ingredient is dropped. So the relationship begins to suffer. The relationship begins to be strained. The very thing that keeps it nimble and flexible and useful begins to let this bond dry out and become brittle. And as it does, it becomes much more fragile. So then a pulling apart and becoming negative toward each other will result. So because they're lacking that thing that helps keep them close and keep them positive, we do not get a very good result. So researchers are finding that if you want your relationship to continue to be strong, play needs to be one of the ingredients and needs to be a priority. So there are all kinds of other things that are necessary, but don't forget play. Now, as we always do at kind of this point in our life class lesson talks, that can happen in all kinds of families. But when it comes to those of us who have come from complex trauma families, we have issues when it comes to play. Hence my little story about myself. I thought I had that licked, but I had just begun my own journey when it came to the role of play. So I want to give you a little list because play can get messed up for us in many different ways. Here's the first. For some children growing up in complex trauma, they might not have been allowed to have fun. And this may not be true for you at all, but for some of you it might really be true. These children might have been seen by their parents as free workforce, as sort of little slaves or little servants, taking care of the other siblings, even taking care of their parents. Could be the emotional needs growing up. They watched the neighbor kids play, but they had too many responsibilities, too much to do to play themselves. And they were never able to play with the others if they were playing or wanted to play, because their parents would say, oh, you've got your chore list, you've got all these responsibilities. You're just being selfish, not finishing that and wanting to play. Or you're just lazy, because if you weren't so lazy, you'd have this work done by now. So play was something, it might not have been actually said with those words, but play was kind of viewed as something that was a luxury or something that you had to earn. Others, the way you're validated within your family was not by playing, but by working. Because then the parent said, wow, you are such a hard worker. I'm so proud of you. I mean, look, thank you for doing all that. So you gained your sense of value from working. Therefore, because of complex trauma, where you don't have an inherent sense of value, see, you just can't see yourself the way that you need to. You just can't get the I'm good enough just the way I am. What you do tell yourself is all my sense of value comes from what I do. And working. If I do all these chores and I get them completed, this means I'm more valuable when I'm working. I don't have value when I'm playing. So I need to work, work, work. That's what gives me value to others. That's what causes the big people to respect me. That's what really causes them to want me. That's really why they have me. That's why I'm in this house. You can just see how the child mind will function with that. And so play doesn't do that. It becomes tossed aside. Play becomes minimized. It becomes seen as unnecessary, even as something I don't want, because in the child's mind it detracts from my value, from my worth, and others won't value me. And then for some people, coming from complex trauma, play wasn't about having fun. Play was all about winning. There's a winner, there's a loser. And the person who lost got teased, got made fun of, and got laughed at. And it was all about shame. And if there wasn't enough shame going on in the family system already, you add that to the pain of the loss. And so this makes hyper competitive kids that they don't get that balance between winning and losing that we talked about a few minutes ago in a healthy home. So, you get a child that grows up where they really, really believe that losing is not an option. Okay, so they're going to have a very skewed view of the world. So play, in this case, is not delightful, it's not joyful. Play is not the reprieve that God intended for it to be. It's hard work, it's intense. Okay, so this is what happened to me in my little illustration with little Melanie. Was like all of a sudden that was work for me, and what was work seemed play. And I realized the cross up of these wires. I saw it so clearly, and I went, oh my gosh, this is going to be my top plate to address. I know what to do about this, but it had never stared me in the face. So it was just time for that layer to come up. So the flip side of this is in some homes, the opposite is true. In some homes, everything is play. There are no rules, there are no chores, you're just going to have fun all the time. And some parents took this even further. And these can mix. I would say my childhood had lots of mixtures in here. You had to be happy all the time. So they might play in the evenings with you, but the point was we don't talk about anything deep, we don't talk about anything serious, and we don't ever talk about problems or struggles. We just want to keep everything light and superficial and fun and rainbows. And that way, if we keep doing that long enough, we are going to convince ourselves that we are a number one terrific family, aren't we? And you're going to have fun whether you like it or not. Everybody agree? Okay, let's go have fun. All right, so there's that. And then for others, and this is so sad to think about and brings up a lot of memories, but this is one style that's very, very true. Fun always involved cruelty. This would be like cut downs, bullying other kids, having fun, quote unquote, by picking on them or being cruel to them or doing things that embarrassed them or made them look really stupid. And then siblings or neighbors might laugh at it, and then everybody's expected to join in. And that was the definition of let's have fun. So, that's definitely a style. For others, you weren't allowed to go and play because mom had such a fear that you would get hurt. Now, this is very much part of my story, very much a part of my story. And so you didn't know what fun was or playing because of mom's fears. And then for others, you played, but you only play how you played because it was what mom and dad told you to do. Okay, we're going to play this game or we're going to do this or that. So in some families, there's no allowing of creativity. And so play is very tightly controlled to what mom and dad allowed. Some kids will play only outside and are never allowed to play in the house. Like if they have OCD parents or parents who always keep the house straight for company. That was a big thing in the 50s. If any of you grew up in the 50s, mom could have been a neat freak or a control freak, afraid the kids might mess something up. Very prim and proper. Tim Fletcher has a great thing where he talked about his brothers were, I think it was 2 years younger and 2 years older, so there are like 3 boys in Canada, and 3 strapping brothers in 6 years. He said his mom was so great because they would just move their furniture in the living room to the side to just create one great big gym. And you can just imagine all these boys in there in the winter when it was just too cold to even go out skating on the pond. And she just turned it into one big gymnasium. And she knew boys, and she knew what it was that they needed. They were all high energy kids, and I just think that is just so great. So sometimes you'll also have parents that just are not involved in their lives. They've never been with their parents in a playful way. If you've got mental illness or you've got physical illness where the parent is not available, or maybe you have a healthy parent for just a teeny little while and then things change, and you never see them able to play again. Those things are really hard. Also, if you've had a parent who's always shooing you off, go, get out of my hair. You're an inconvenience. So play means this is how I get rid of you. And that's a clear message. So again, you can probably look at these, may have 3 or 4 things going, but it helps you to know this is what my message was. This is what I need to correct. This is probably what I tell me about me today. You could get a handle on this. We can replace these things. We can replace these incorrect messages and start giving yourself the healthy messages about play. So also too, go away, go play, get up from the table, go away. How is a child supposed to feel other than, well, I'm really a burden. I'm not wanted here. So play was a way of getting rid of us. And then, and I started seeing this about 25 years ago when video games and big screens really started becoming big, with some of the friends of my sons, that I thought was really a new phenomenon. Tim Fletcher talks about it. Some parents, when they played, they were not able to model balance for their kids because they went into total obsession with the toy. were with the game. Like all of a sudden, the parent would be playing a new video game or something, and all of a sudden they weren't really a parent anymore because they got consumed with the video game, and they didn't teach the kid balance or play. I recall one occurrence with a fellow, that little boy we used to pick up all the time, and we got our whole group together, and they really got into that, and the house went from being like always open and the parents at the door to being the shades drawn and never seeing the parents because they were in there playing the video games. And the child really started having problems at school because the parents weren't helping them with their homework. It was a very sad thing as you watch years later, because they got into gaming and addiction and things like that. And there really are, believe it or not, if the parents were not parented healthily themselves, you'll kind of get remarks from kids, "Oh, I can't show my dad this, because he'll take it over," or my mom and I fought over this game, and you kind of ears perk up and go, "What? Your mom?" And this had started to become a real phenomenon in the last 15 years. So what can start out as a very healthy escape for someone with boundaries can quickly turn into an unhealthy escape where it became an addiction, taking all their time. So play can be something that starts out well, but then used wrongly can turn out very negative. Here's another one, and this was very big, I think, in certain church denominations or certain very rigid or controlling fundamentalist pockets of the country. If you grew up hearing this, quote unquote, idle hands are the devil's workshop. In other words, if you have idle hands, that means you're not working. Very black and white. And that would enable you to play if you're not working. And if you didn't play, you were going to get in trouble. So you got to stay busy all the time. And if you don't stay busy all the time, you're going to do something bad. Do you see this black and white? Really a little web of lies. And to a child, that would be like, well, I am here to do something bad. If I'm not playing, so I might as well go do it. It's really interesting, this whole little web of things in here that a child is trained. And so, the child really never hears the message about unstructured play. Go see what you can make that's beautiful. Silence, rest, presence. That is totally foreign. Spirituality is totally foreign in that case. So I don't know how many of those applied to any of you listening, but I hope that gives you just a little bit of insight into how complex trauma can take this beautiful area of life and really mess it up for a lot of people. And recovery, really takes a lot of time and patience. And one of the things to watch out for in your recovery is the tendency, it's whether you're with teachers or groups or maybe you're going through churches that may or may not be mature in this process, is that there's kind of a myth that recovery is constant vigilance. You can't drop your guard. You've got to be working at it all the time. So the goal of recovery is that you get healthier and healthier and more balanced. And that includes play, and that includes fun. The second thing that can happen is that some people never get to that balance point, and they continue to think that recovery has to be constant work, constant serious, constant vigilance. So they might see you having fun and getting more balanced. And so you might be in a situation where you're just really doing a balanced approach, somebody might raise their eyebrow at you and in some overly religious, controlling way say, you know, "Oh, you might really want to take a look at that." They might look down at you, they judge you, they condemn you, and that can really throw you off and make you feel ostracized from them. So Tim Fletcher says it really well. What I want you to understand is that some people who have lots of years of recovery doesn't mean they've gotten more healthy. They've got a lot of time put in, but they haven't grown a lot. And so, yes, you will probably get judged by some, but don't let that stop you from getting healthy. You will have to endure some of that. But then there's the very real issue that comes for many in recovery who don't just have complex trauma, but they struggle with addiction issues. Oh, sorry. I should have put a period in the end of that sentence. So anyway, and I have had that many times. I'll try to be open and very vulnerable. And I remember one time presenting with my husband to a much older congregation and talking about what I do to keep variety and hobbies and things like that alive in my life. And someone took me aside after and she said, "But that means you won't be in that worship service. Is that correct?" And I said, "Well, absolutely. I try not to be." She goes, "Well, I'm warning you, you might want to take a look at that." And it was in public. And, I cannot tell you how many, times. And so, I, having had a history of that in certain denominations, we will have that. And Jesus tells us in the Bible, we will have that. We will have that. So again, just right here. Now, the other thing that we want to say is that for some people who don't have balance, who struggle with addictions, play and pleasure can, of course, be misused, as in my earlier example. And they use it as a distraction from dealing with their emotions or stresses of life. So they can also misuse it in healthy ways. So you may have friends, you may have other people who just don't know, they don't have any boundaries or don't know when to stop. Also, humor can be used in very unhealthy ways. And so humor can be used to avoid looking at a person's own issues or to avoid feeling pain. They can use it to get other people to like them, try to get rid of conflict or tension, a way of avoiding dealing with important things. So, learning to distinguish healthy humor from unhealthy humor, this is another thing that we need to be aware of too. I want you to start exploring any avenues that have brought you joy in the past or that you have thought of that might be some creative ways, many of which cost nothing, many of which you can do in your very own kitchen, your own backyard. Um, Anything that you have thought about that you think might bring you joy or be unstructured play that you need to allow yourself to do, that you could do with art or music or dancing or fishing or hobbies. What would be really fun for me? Just begin to establish your mind in a place where there's not a winner, not a loser. It's not going to trigger that aggressiveness or competitiveness, perhaps. Just a little shift in your perfection, in your perspective, can absolutely work wonders. And then again, if you want something more structured, if I took a lesson, what would it be? Would it be horseback riding or canoeing or going to a petting zoo, learning a new language, taking a trip? Allow yourself to dream a little bit. I challenge you to just put pen to paper, get some time, Set a time for 10 minutes and see what happens this next week. Because as we said, play is an essential ingredient as sleep and nutrition to your well-being. So I hope that helps you. I hope that gives you a lot of ideas about what you can add to your life to just improve this area of playing well. I hope that you are blessed and enriched this week, and I'll see you this time next week.